So the reason that that I think this is worthy of discussion, especially for new leaders, you guys, is as you start on your leadership journey, and let's say you're hungry on that leadership journey, you're ambitious, you want to be a good leader, and you want some responsibility, you're part of a company or a team that you want to carry some weight, take on a project, lead some other people. And so you start self-developing and exposing yourself to leadership content, and there's a lot of good stuff out there. And one of the things, though, as you continue to read, like if you were to spend a lot of time paying attention to LinkedIn, for example, and you're following conversations about leadership development, organizational development, in a very short period of time, you're going to start hearing things about good leaders, great leaders, bad bosses is one of the favorite terms, toxic managers. And so you're going to start asking yourself some leadership questions, and you're going to get exposed to a lot of knowledge. So with this, with the big L leadership and the small L leadership, what I want to do is, and our style at the Motivation Place is to never tell somebody how to lead. What we want to do is just give you different lenses, because everybody's different, and you're going to develop your own leadership style, your strengths and weaknesses over time. And so what we want to do for you is to present you different lenses, different ways to look at leadership, so that as you're self-assessing and determine your own strengths and weaknesses and your own comfort zones, this stuff will start to make sense for you, and you're going to start to find your own way and your own brand of leadership, if you will. Now it may resemble everybody else's, but again, there'll probably be some very small unique things that make you your own unique leader. Typically, in a conversation, when we talk about leadership, we what I want to recommend is, let's define that. Let's make sure we understand what exactly are we talking about, because we throw this word leader and leadership around, and it's a giant word. It has a lot of implications, and it literally means a lot of different things to different people. So we're going to put this in two lenses today, and one of them is called the big L leader. And unfortunately, this tends to be the role model of leadership. And big L leadership is, the way that I would explain it is, it's that command leader. It's a person who is in charge of a lot of things, big vision, strategy, all of the managerial things, the structures, the logistics, deployment, operational decisions is typically, obviously you have to have a leader in that chair that's making those kind of decisions. But oftentimes what happens is the higher a leader goes in an organization, and they execute big L leadership well, over time they miss out on the small L component of leadership, which is the people side of the equation. And so as you listen to these conversations of frustrated employees, disengaged employees, alienated employees, people have left companies because they felt the culture was toxic or management was toxic. It because there's something happening in leadership development, where folks are gravitating to this image of the big commanding leader, the CEO of a company, the Elon Musk of the world. You're building these awesome empires and you're making these huge decisions, but what's missing again is that small L component. So small L leadership is all about the interpersonal skills. It's all about understanding others' motivations. It's asking questions like, why do we exist? Why should we work here? Why do we want to work? Why do I want to work harder? Why would I want to bring my discretionary effort uh, to play, for this leader? And so small L leadership is the human component. That's where all the motivation is and the inspiration, and that's where our, the actual emotional component. So where I'm bringing all this together is, I would like to define leadership almost as big L. We would call this maybe the management intelligence, and small L leadership is where we combine, or we think about this in terms of emotional intelligence. And if you're into culture building or culture design and leadership, you're going to hear emotional intelligence spoken about a lot. So what is it? What is emotional intelligence? We're going to be covering that in great length at the Motivation Place and these follow-on instructional videos. And you can also look for, we are currently writing a book called Moto 30, and it has 30 awesome individual unique challenges that a leader is going to be able to open up the book today and go, man, that is something I can do with my team today that will reinforce the emotional intelligence aspect of your leadership and also bring it to the team so that, obviously the byproduct of that is you got a team that's optimized. Your people are engaged, they're motivated, they're bringing their discretionary effort to the table, their best effort, every day. And that's what we're looking for as leaders, right? The big L leaders, that management intelligence, that's wrapping your head around the big systems and all the components and machinery of a giant organization. And as you grow, hopefully you'll get to a point where you master both of these, because you're quintessential leaders. And as John Maxwell describes them in his levels of leadership, the pinnacle leader. A pinnacle leader is somebody who has they've achieved or they've climbed to the level of big L leadership, big powerful CEO, president of a company, a lot of people, important company, important work, but they've maintained that emotional intelligence component all along the way. When you combine these two, those are the leaders that you're willing to commit your life to follow. These are the folks that you'll go the extra mile for. You'll never go the extra mile for just an MI big leader. Never happen, because these people, they don't show that they care about you, and they probably don't. They've been groomed their whole life to really be focusing on the actual machinery of an organization, and instead of the human component. So as we move forward with um, uh, the Motivation Place and our content, I want this to be a platform. So when we're talking about leadership, we will absolutely talk about some big L things, big strategy, vision, how to build a culture that produces a legacy, not only a business legacy, but a personal legacy for people. But it has to be fueled with that EI component, that small L emotionally intelligent leader. So I look forward to, again, just linking this, and you'll see how this fits into all the kind of developmental content that we're going to bring in your way. So at this point, Jess and Mike, seeing this the first time, I'm interested in your thoughts on how this might apply to the course that we're building, or just some experiences that you've had with big L leaders and small L leaders.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that between like the difference between the big L and the small L, do you think that that comes with experience, or is that more of a personality trait that someone has to have? Because not there's a few people, um, and usually they're famous. There's a few leaders that just start they start big, and so is it because they haven't had that chance to be the customer service, you know what I mean? Or can they still start big and learn the small attributes?
It's a great question, and it really reminds me of, I was thinking about a similar thought, and it's that entrepreneur. Think about the brilliant entrepreneur who comes up with, an idea for a company or a product that it practically goes viral, right? Big exploding growing company. Well, what did that entrepreneur started that company? He's probably CEO, vice president, founder, and their focus and their intellect is all, it's all about what, it's all about the product, it's all about the
Yeah,
app that they're building or whatever.
improvements. Yeah.
Yes. And so typically, so you have this person, and they're a visionary. So that's in terms of a leadership component, there's a vision aspect there, right? So they're looking ahead, and they're seeing, okay, there's a spot in the marketplace for this, there's a niche, and then at some point that entrepreneur has to answer the question, how am I going to get there? Well, you don't accomplish anything without people, right? You got to have people in this equation. So what typically happens is that tech genius, that entrepreneur, they may skyrocket in terms of building a business that's generating revenue. They can create all the components to do that. But if they don't have that emotional intelligent component going in, it's only a matter of time before, once you start picking up a number of people, well, what's going to happen when, they're part of this team, but they're not feeling the EI at all,
Yeah,
right?
it's like the
They're,
motivation just tanks.
the motivation tanks. And so typically what you have is in a lot of organizations, you have kind of this let's call it a, similar to a bell curve trajectory. Start out with nothing and you start growing, right? And you get up here, and then a lot of companies start going into decline at some
The
point.
flame dies, yeah.
The flame dies. So the folks coming in, that are following this, the entrepreneurial Pied Piper, you know, what's the attraction? What's the excitement of that offer? Why do they join this to be a part of the adventure? Well, if it's just a tangible reward, if it's strictly we're offering money to do this, then again, EI, emotional intelligence, there's a lot of emotions that are super important if you want to build a long-term business.
Yeah,
Loyalty
they
is
almost
one,
have to
right?
trump the money too. They have to be
Yes.
they have to be more important.
Yeah, and so we'll be introducing that concept of some performance that we talked about. That it literally kind of captures the concept of when you think about in terms of science, the holy grail of machines, the perpetual machine. Well, let's ask that same question with businesses and people. How can we create a business that is almost purposely designed to stand the test of time? How do you put safeguards in for these declines? In Jim Collins, one of his it was his second or third book, How the Mighty Fall, talks about the 5 stages of decline. Super important information, and it choreographs perfectly with what we're talking about, because you'll see the meteoric rise of a company, and then they hit the first benchmark of decline, which is called, it's number one here. So number one is hubris, born from success. And you start getting cocky and you think that yeah, you did this all on your own, and the people that help you get there aren't important. And that's literally the first place things start to crack, is when the success comes in. they
It
you
gets
spent
in your head, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So and then the worst thing that you see a lot of these companies destroy themselves is they get to the second point, which is, and it's one of our favorite words here. So one was hubris, born from success, and then the second stage of decline, undisciplined pursuit of more. What do you think of that one right there? Does that make sense? You start making all this money, right? And you start believing in your own success. There's no reason that this money's coming in other than you, right? And you get a little cocky. And then what happens? The next thing, that when you take it, especially a young team, that they haven't developed long-term vision. They have enough strong enough vision to maybe get a product to the finish line, but they haven't looked ahead and figured out, what are all those obstacles and barriers ahead. And so they get into the unbridled pursuit of more, not thinking about, what the potential consequences are there. Either get too far in debt, start getting way too many projects going on that end up losing you money. Countless examples. And then this third one, which is really where you'll see it set in. And I know, in some of our personal conversations, you've experienced this personally. Jess, you were telling me how you were offering some great advice to one of your bosses at the time, and it was based on your real-time observations about what's going on. And what happened is that wasn't the information your boss wanted to hear. So it
Right.
was it
Yeah.
was rejected, it was denied, and that literally is the third stage of decline, which is denial of risk or peril. And there's a couple after those, but this is where the real meat of catching the trouble area, going back to, this whole conversation of, how does it start? Young leaders, their first role model is typically a big L leader. Who doesn't want to be the boss man? You see the boss, right? The boss got a big fancy car. She's got the great house and all this stuff going on. Who doesn't want you to follow? We set that as a role model. When
Yeah.
but this is where the rubber meets the road right here. Your greatest leaders have both of these going on. And the other thing is, small L leaders are often not even in leadership positions, so they can be a non-positional leader. It's somebody who's on a team that when the boss isn't around, and maybe the team needs a pick me up. Maybe the team needs somebody to step up and say, "Hey, no, we don't do this when the boss is around. We're going to do our jobs, for no other reason than just being, aligned with the company and doing things right. That's your small L leader. Your small L leader picks people's up. They fill in the cracks that the higher level leaders, drop where they drop the ball. So worth their weight in gold. And what's interesting is your small L leaders, they're the most respected among the troops, and they become the most respected among
Trustworthy. Yeah.
trustworthy. Yeah, the whole 9 yards. Now, if I was going to recommend to anybody, let me back that off, because my opinion doesn't matter. There's two roads to go if you're going to step into a leadership role. And you can start out with the command style, the authoritarian style. Just keep in mind, and people are going to comply because you've been, kind of granted the authority of a position. You can step right into a big L style. But without this is where the loyalty, and the respect is earned, and the trust and the communication happens. So it's a choice. My if you'll take my recommendation, I would start here first. Let's just be a great team person, be a great supporter of the folks around you. This will come in time, it's also a skill to learn. Being able to stand up in front of a whole organization and speak confidently with a command presence doesn't come easy for everybody. So it's an interesting dichotomy of leadership, but I think we need to talk about it if we're going to continue on with these talks, right?
How do you encourage people that, especially younger generations, and my age, that we're told that you kind of have to do the, I guess, kind of have the crappy jobs and start off with the small roles and just kind of do your part and know your place. I've been told many times to know my place, and especially with internships and that sort of thing. So,
Hmm.
how do you, I guess, encourage uh, the younger generations to stick with it? And it's not a, you have to train them not to see it that way, that it's actually just as important. It's just a different role.
Right.
Because
Well,
I feel like a lot of people who have that role, they look down on themselves and they're constantly thinking about what comes next and they're not focused on what they're currently doing.
yeah. So interesting. I mean, good question. I can a personal story. So my two sons, who they talk to me more about for whatever reason, they talk to me more about their workplace drama than my daughters do. But so my oldest, real quick story here. He goes to work for these guys. They had a young company, same similar to what we were talking about. They were manufacturing when COVID took out. They were already making blinds, vertical blind materials. So COVID comes out, and now they're making all these transparent sheets, hanging sheets, all this other stuff, because they were adaptable, which is fantastic. I commend them. Um, and so now they're retooling. So my son gets involved at that point where they hire him. He's labor. He's working in the warehouse, and he likes it. He's making decent hourly wage, a little bit more than minimum, and it's just he was learning things. The owners were on site every day. They were including him in conversations. He was part of the vision and the daily state of the business, because they were all working together. Well, things kind of exploded in a good way. And so now my son gets promoted, and they send him out into the field where it's customer interaction, and he's doing installs. So as the company grows, what do these leaders do? Well, they're out there with them. And they got this real nice simpatico thing going on. Well, after about 6 months, the owners, they're raking it in now. They're bringing in, making some money, what do you think happens? What do you think? I think I just covered the 5 stages of decline. What do you think happened? They got here hubris. They got into some undisciplined pursuit of more, and then at this point is where there was things. My son's a sharp kid, and so he was seeing some things manifest on the execution side out in the field. And when it happened, it was after ownership had checked out. So these guys, they're enjoying their success, and all of a sudden they're fishing more, they're traveling more, and they're letting things run on autopilot. In the meantime, they're not having the structured meetings they're supposed to, the continuous improvement
Yeah.
discussions, and all of the little things. And here's my son who, he has he's focused and he wants to perform at a high professional level. He wants to do a great job, and all of a sudden he's caught in the middle of this customer drama. One is which he's not trained for. He's out with other people in the field that have no accountability and have no work ethic like he does. So he's watching his teammates completely screw off and not handle things properly. He's in over his head with customer complaints because he can't get the response. The ownership team is fishing. He's still paying what getting paid well, but what do you think he ended up doing? To come full circle with your question, he left. He quit.
Probably, yeah, quitting,
He
yeah.
quit, and he was devastated. He didn't want to quit, but he got himself into a situation where he
Toxic.
saw it was toxic. Not personally toxic, but it was professionally toxic. That got to a point where that did not help him in any way. He wasn't growing anymore. So he pulled
Right.
he pulled. And that's exactly what happened. So, my advice to young people is first of all, there's nobody more important in the entire world than you. Seriously, I don't know how many people will ever tell you that, but there is nobody more important in the world than you. You come first. This is your life. It's your reality. You were born on a date, and you're going to die on a date, and you are the author of that dash in between. And so, it just like I'm going to give you the second story, the follow up to answer this question is my younger son, who's, he's got the work ethic and he's driven and he's got a passion for the culinary arts. So as soon as he turned 15, he went. I took him straight up. We live about a mile from a really nice public golf club, high end. Man, it's just one of the most beautiful courses in Michigan. But so he goes to work for them last summer. He's doing dishes. He's under good leadership. Man, he's excited. He's going to work every day, and they're giving him little bumps in pay, and they're taking care of him. This summer, he goes back there. Not only now he starts out, he's doing dishes again, working hard, but then he's taken an interest in the other parts of the operation, and so leadership noticed that he's interested and he's a good worker. So he's got himself a couple raises, and now they've trained him and they've worked him into the lineup. He's 16 years old, and he's cooking in the kitchen for large numbers of people. Not everything. He's not a full line chef, but they have him doing things that he's becoming immensely proud of. Like he had a couple weeks ago, they gave him an event called the Afterglow, where lots of golfers throughout the month can show up for an event that's presented, by the clubhouse, and sometimes 150 people at the Afterglow. And he's got to prepare food for 150 folks. They gave that exclusively to him. I'm so proud, and he took it on. So now
Yeah.
where I'm going with this is, again, so here's this kid that's busting his butt, taking on all this extra responsibility, gaining, extra responsibility, and they present to him this big raise. We really appreciate you. We're giving you a 25% raise. Sounds fantastic, right? Well, he realized at the same time what they do is they cut him out of the tip pool. That was the exact same.
Oh, yeah.
So again, now this is a really interesting conversation with
Tit
a
for
16-year-old.
tat.
Yeah. So what do you want to do? How do you feel about that? We had a great conversation, and his conclusion is I like working here. I don't appreciate what they've done and the little
Yeah.
switcheroo, but the season, he's a seasonal work. He's going back to school. He says, I'm going to stay there and I'm going to continue to learn. So now his motivation from the job is no longer, it's not upward mobility, because he's seen that becomes a dead end rather quickly. And so his motivation to stay and continue to do a good work is to learn as much as he can for his next adventure. And so he's still showing up to work every day, highly motivated, bringing his A game, happy with everybody, but he knows that he has an exit plan in his mind. And so he's going to work, he's going to work it and do a good job, and he's going to leave on good terms. So I would recommend that any young person find the place that you enjoy working and that you're actually getting some professional development opportunities from it. whether it's increased responsibility, whether you got a leader that's showing you the ropes, how does the business work? Because that's what, ultimately I spent 15 years of my adult life while I was a Marine. So this is during my Marine Corps career, recruiting young people into military service. One of the most wonderful experiences of my life because I got to know young people. Hey, what's important, and you come to find out everybody wants the same thing out of life. We want to be happy. We want to be marketable. We want to have the ability to buy things, do things, and enjoy life. And so how we go about doing that, there's choices, whether it's school, whether it's work. My advice, Jess, and I know I took a long time answering this question, but for young folks, first of all, don't listen to any of these people telling you can't do things. This younger generation is more talented and more intelligent than any folks I've ever worked with. And I and Jess, you're one of them. So I have to tell you, you're a different kind of human being. I call you guys tech sapiens, because think about it. Because you you
Yeah.
you are you are unlike any human being that's ever walked the face of the earth, because in you and in your generation, you have more access to information in the palm of your hand than any human being has ever had. You know,
So, okay, so question then off of
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Um, do you think that can, because oftentimes it does go to our head and then we do get a little, prideful. And I'm just wondering, do we, is that why we purposely look for those big L roles and we're not, I mean, if you look at society right now in our economy, there's everywhere's hiring.
yeah,
And I'm not even talking about the pandemic. I just think it's put everybody in a spot where, um, you know, we kind of do know our skills, so we're purposely not working because we're just waiting for the right opportunity to come along, that recognizes us for like what we're,
hmm,
what we're good at,
yeah,
and what we bring to the table. So I think there's like, and I don't have the right answer. Maybe it's a balance between the two, but um, yeah, I guess maybe my generation is just a little selfish in that area, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's a good thing and a fun thing that we do have all this knowledge, but we're not willing to, I guess, settle to at least have a job. A lot of us just kind of wait it out, and I guess it gets to our heads. Is that fair to say?
yeah. It's a big, well, and there's a big question behind that, and it comes down to
The why,
the why.
right? Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. So, as a young person, just ask yourself why. Why do you want to work? I can tell you that my sons, the ones I gave you example, of, they know why they're working. They're not working just to
right.
work. And I think so. Part of the problem that young people are going to have today is it's really not. It's not even their problem. It's the leadership, the systemic leadership gaps that are abundant throughout business America, from small business to big business. You got all kinds of folks that have been following this big L model, and this has nothing to do with inspiring people. The only time, this becomes about inspiring people, where the big L leaders should be stepping in with a command voice that inspires, is when things are dire, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we got our backs against the wall. Your small leaders are naturally going to be taking care of the people around them, but that's when the big L leader steps up and says, I got you. We got this. We're going to get through this. And that's what we need to hear when we're part of an organization. You got to hear it from the top, right? And so, but coming back to, again, this big L model, though, it's this isn't where the servant leadership is happening. And Mike, we talked about that yesterday. That word is kind of, it's a poor word choice for what we're actually talking about in this big L small L domains. Servant leadership. Everybody's talking about what is servant leadership, or they're talking about servant leadership. We need to talk about what is servant leadership, and what that is that's much more of a small unit leader. My guys and gals around me are the most important people in the world because I am nothing without them, right? We are not a team unless we are a team. So it's those kind of things I think we need to talk about. John Maxwell's. he puts out some fantastic leadership content. So anybody listening, I highly recommend and John Maxwell's work. Starting with, you can start with the 5 levels of leadership. So the first one that he talks about is the first level of leadership is positional leadership. You've been given a title. Okay, what does that mean? If you're a young leader and you're thinking big L type thoughts, you're going to come in to your small team and you're going to start bossing people around, and before you know it, it won't take long. You're going to have a different team there, and you're going to continue with the big L behaviors, and the people are going to keep leaving. When you look at an organization that has as a retention problem, has a turnover problem, you're going to find a disproportionate numbers. That ratio is going to be out of balance between small leadership, the small leadership component, and voice. It's the small leadership core values that should be integrated from the very top of the chain all the way down. You're going to see a real imbalance where there's too much D, too much direction, too much command and big L leadership. Um, Not enough small L leadership. It's the small L leadership that makes it all happen.
Yeah.
You can go a long time in working in corporate America before you'll stumble across a conversation about big L and small L. Going back to Dr. Robert Kelly, crediting him, this came out of the Star at Work project that took place in the 90s. Um, yeah, he wrote it in the 90s. The research project was 10 years, and so this content came from talking to some really brilliant small L and big L leaders, trying to capture this stuff. What are we talking about here? What are the dynamics that seem to be getting things mucked up, and what is confusing leaders on what they need to do? As you guys know, being a retired Marine, I will share this with you. The Marine Corps simplifies everything. There's one of our favorite, uh, I'll call it a Marine acronym, but for all you Army guys and sailors out there and Air Force folks, you know this too very well, and it's called KISS, and that stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. All right, we won't say that, but what we do is we end up breaking up leadership into a bifurcated might be the right word, or not a binary, because they're together. They're two things that flow together. Is that the right term? Bifurcated? A bifurcation of energy. So you guys help me out. So the two energies or the two focus areas of or expectations of Marine leadership are a mission, accomplishment, and this is a big and. This is why a lot of your leaders coming out of the Marine Corps are your balanced big L, small L leaders, because the nature of the guidance of mission accomplishment is accomplish a mission while taking care of your troops. Fundamentally different than a lot of business missions, where the business mission is make money and kill any troops that get in the way of that. It's right. So as a leader, it becomes a personal decision. It's a moral decision on how you want to lead. My recommendation: embrace the Marine Corps ethos and do both. You accomplish a mission while also you're 100% committed to taking care of your troops. That's the balance between, in my mind, between big L and small L leadership. You work your way up as a small unit leader. You're taking care of your teams. Your team takes care of you. They're growing, you're growing, and eventually, you're doing you got that perfect balance of big L and small L leadership, which creates the perfect unit. It will always create the best outcome, hands down, every time, especially for, when we factor in longevity and the ability to continue to keep things going. And that's really what we're looking for in culture is we have such a healthy culture that it transcends personalities. You look at some of these companies where the stock tumbles when the CEO announces that the CEO is going to leave, right? Well, that's a personality dependent culture. That's not a strong culture. A strong culture survives leadership. It survives bad leaders. It survives good one, because the culture at every aspect of the way is building leaders and creating followers that support the mission and take care of everybody around them. So just kind of a little bit of a leadership philosophy tied in this at the end as well.
One of the differences I see between the military and business is if you have a person that's in the wrong spot in life. I mean, they can be hidden in a corporate life for 10, 20 years. And
Mhm.
if they're in the military, those people I think are washed out because they have to adhere to, the minimum. Um, you can't hide somebody that can't do the mission. And so I
Right.
think a lot of people wash out of the military where corporate if you have a huge company, people can sit there for 30 years and just be incompetent. And I don't think they can do that if you're in the military and people notice and you're affecting everybody around you. And in corporate life, people don't really care. A lot of times they go, oh, well, he'll just sit there and I'll move up the ladder. But yeah, I think there's a big difference between military. Never been in the military, but I'm just thinking that that person who sat there in the office for 30 years and did nothing would have been washed out because he couldn't meet the mission goal in the military.
Absolutely. So it's highly structured in the sense that it's a move up or out career.
Right.
And a huge, if you're looking for a parallel, Jack Welch in GE was very similar. A constant churn of signs of underperformance in the early ranks. Boom, you get promoted, and then again, all right, how are those folks doing? How are we evaluating them? Are they competing? Et cetera. And again, it's one of those things where it's up and out. You have we were talking about this in another conversation the other day, and let me pull this. Hang on a second. It's called the Peter Principle. And so let's say they've reached a role where they're a director, so they're maybe they're 3 levels up in the chain, and you get into that point where that person's starting to attend these higher level meetings. Responsibilities are getting a little bit higher, and they might even have, let's say they have the emotional intelligence component down, but their weak area is that maybe that it's starting to stretch them on that command presence, that big L component. And then but at this level, the person's fantastic in their role. Everything's happening. The division's hitting their numbers, or whatever metrics you want to use to define success in a business. And then timing happens. You're seeing this person's running this division good, and now they get promoted up to another level where now they're operating. They're the data that they're interpreting, the people, the structures, the responsibilities, the logistics, everything changes. It's a much larger level of responsibility and command, and they crash and burn. That's what the Peter principle is. And to your point, Mike, you'll find people in, if the organization isn't actively assessing the performance of all of different leaders throughout the chain, you're gonna get somebody that ends up in a position where they're not competent for the position, but they might be strong enough or adept enough to hide in the position. And then now what you have, that turns into what I call roster plaque. It sticks it sticks to the walls, and it's going to be there for a long time, and it's literally got to be rooted out. And that happens. That's that pragmatic area I was talking about in a couple videos when we talk about the progression of followers. It so anybody watching this video, if you're building a company and you're looking at bringing on personnel, you got to think about those things. When you think about promoting somebody, somebody may have a lot of potential, but potential doesn't mean execution. So we've seen this happen so many times. A wonderful person gets promoted right into the Peter Principle seat. They don't know how to be a vice president, right? They don't know how to be a C-suite executive, but there's so much potential, and there's enough to bank on where you go, oh yeah, well, they've assimilated into every other role successfully, and they get us sent forward on the next one, but that was the limit. That's where very senior leaders and other people need to come in to help. Why would you fire this person after they've made this incredible climb and commitment in your organization? But we see it happen every day. Every day, all of a sudden somebody gets promoted. 6 months later, they're gone because they didn't meet whatever the new dynamic was that they were not prepared for, Peter principle wise. They died. They got shot or excised out of the role or the organization. It's a tragedy that happens every day because businesses don't have enough conversations about people and leadership. They get so hung up on this big L focused of metrics and KPIs and mission, hitting these mission targets, all coming from people who sit on a board who have no skin in the game. They will never do any of the effort required. And so, you think about how it quickly unravels, and you don't have this high functioning machine that you really could. I mean, it's not hard to do, but we get in our way of ourselves, as senior leaders.
Remotely Crazy, the Motivator's Guide series from The Motivation Place. 3 generations became friends, shared ideas, and came together to provide a positive voice in a sea of negativity. They started creating, built a website, joined social channels to network with individuals around the globe, and wrote and published their first book, Remotely Crazy, The Motivator's Guide to Thriving in This Crazy, Hybrid, Pandemically Oppressed, Tech-Laden World. The 10 chapters of this book answer some of life's most difficult questions in the work world today. Find them at the website, TheMotivationPlace.com, and connect on Instagram and Facebook at The Motivation Place. Grab your copy and share with your social networks now.